I met so many beautiful, wonderful exjws when I was in Oslo during the trial. And as you know, I was fortunate enough to have some of them on my channel. And the woman you are about to hear and see is quite a character. Her name is Monica Levine Rodriguez. Yes, she has the same last name as Pablo, I also interviewed. And how come that? Is that a coincidence? You do the math. No, they are not siblings. Monica was a very zealous Jehovah's Witnesses. And she is now an ex-JW, but just as much, if not more zealous. She's going to tell you some incredible things. One of them is that she put up a billboard, a giant billboard, exposing not only Jehovah's Witnesses, but all religions that are exposing people for mandated shunning. She's also a team member of the organization StopMandatedShunning.org that I can highly recommend. It's a gigantic job they're doing in that organization. Tell your story on their website and help other people understand what's going on behind the closed doors in the kingdom halls. She's also going to tell you an incredible story, including kidnapping of her own mother. Yes, it is a crazy story, even amongst Jehovah's Witnesses. Kidnapping her own mother. Yeah, I know I'm making a cliffhanger here, but you need to hear that story. And it's going very fast. She's a big talker. She's a typical American and it's going fast. So buckle your seat belts and listen. Every word is very, very interesting. Unfortunately, it went too fast when I set up the equipment when I interviewed her. So the camera is out of focus. You can only see my big, fat, bubbly head on focus, and then she's a little blurred in the background. But you can still see her beauty. Oh, but the sound is good, so you win some, you lose some. As always, if you would like to, please subscribe, share, leave a comment, or whatever you want to do with this. If you don't want to do anything, just listen. It's okay. We can still be friends. Oh, welcome to the podcast Udstødt.
And it's just around the corner.
All right. Oh, can I have this?
Yeah, of course you can.
Can I be sipping on my wine?
You should. I have been sitting, and Pablo is sitting there. He didn't have anything. No, it's okay. It's fine.
Now
we be clean. Now we are talking. Now it's gotta be fun.
Right?
Was it?
I like the European style interview.
We're not real Jehovah's Witnesses up here. Yeah, I had a friend when I was Jehovah's Witness from Minnesota.
Oh, yeah.
You're from Seattle, right?
No, we're from Minnesota.
You're from Minnesota.
Yeah.
Okay. Before the interview, do you know a guy? They're called.
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody's called in Minnesota. I know,
Yeah.
but he was a doctor.
A doctor?
I forgot his name.
I don't know him.
His first name. But a doctor as a Jehovah's Witness, I remember.
Right,
it's unusual. He was an elder. And I said, what about the blood issue? Because he worked at a hospital. He said, I'm not working with this. And I'm in the trauma area. And if someone comes in, I just say, I cannot do anything about that. I'm a Jehovah's Witness. And they respected that.
Wow.
So he was a doctor before he became a Jehovah's Witness. What are the odds for that?
Yeah, right.
You should have a brain.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Right, yeah.
No, I should not. I wouldn't say that. Sorry. It's reload this. Okay. So here we have Mr. Pablo Rodriguez wife, Monica Valine
Right.
Anna Rodriguez. Part Swedish, Finnish, Norwegian. What was your percentage?
Yeah, 50%, basically 50% Norwegian, 25% Swedish, 25% Finnish.
So you are in the right place. No Danes in your blood? No. Okay.
Well, actually, there is part of like the Swedish, when they show the DNA, like ancestry, they show the map and they circle part of the
southern part, Denmark.
They circle part of Denmark when they're showing Sweden. Like there could be some overlap with DNA.
Interesting.
Slightly, but it's
So a lot of Scandinavian blood is flowing in your
yeah.
arteries. That's fine. What are you doing here on the other side of the earth?
Yeah,
I asked your husband to say Atlantic, and you're using it's costly, very
Yeah.
costly,
Yeah.
and you don't understand. Even though you have Scandinavian blood, you don't understand Norwegian.
No. And we're not here enough time to really do too much fun. We did have a little bit of fun, but mostly just to support the people who are testifying at the trial because it's exciting and we're hoping that this will be a precedent in other countries. So yeah, just here to be a support and then also meet other people because we knew that if we came, we would meet a lot of really amazing people that also wanted to come here. So, which has been the case.
It's interesting. The people from Seattle, Minnesota, are you? There are people from New Zealand, Australia, France, Finland, Iceland. A lot of people from Iceland. It's so funny. They're making a party here. That's so funny, the people from Iceland. So your impression is, until now, pretty good of the XJW community here in Scandinavia.
Yes, it's been lovely.
Okay, first question, because I heard a story about you. We need to start with this, so don't forget it. You made a billboard after you left Jehovah's Witnesses. Tell me that story. That's incredible.
Yeah, so I'm fourth generation witness on my dad's side, third generation on my mom's side. So everyone is witnesses. All my, aunts and uncles, cousins, siblings, parents, obviously. Anyway, and so when I was very involved for many years, and I left when I was around 40. But I had been a pioneer, applied for Gilead, did volunteer construction work. Just always very active, and I knew I would lose everyone, and I did lose everyone, except for my little brother, who he was kind of fading, but still kind of believed, and I helped him realize this wasn't really true. But yeah, so lost everybody, and I was in the town where I grew up, a little town in Wisconsin. The population sign says 2,000 people.
And one congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses.
One congregation, and of course everyone knows that that Kingdom Hall is right on a main road, and everyone knows witnesses. They've gone to school with them, they've worked with them. A very tight knit community, where everyone knows everything and talks about each other. And so I was in that little town where I grew up visiting. I don't go there very often, and I thought how I was laying in bed because I couldn't sleep, and I was thinking about how I was so physically in such close proximity to all these people that I grew up with, that I loved, that loved me, that were like my, like family to me or close friends. And then I had all this close family in this town. And yet I couldn't talk to any of them. If I ran into them in the grocery store, they wouldn't talk to me. If I showed up at their house, they wouldn't.
Even though you were not disfellowshipped.
No, I was not. But because I had told one of my aunts that I didn't believe, basically, I didn't say it that way. She was kind of being self-righteous, and I decided to send her an email where I said, you shouldn't be so self-righteous about everything the governing body says because they've changed their mind.
Oh, Satan speaking.
Yes. And I gave the example of, they've changed their mind on organ transplants because they used to not allow them, and now they do. And I said, in 1975, they predicted the end, and it didn't happen. So I gave a couple examples. I knew that she would cut me off, and I knew eventually everyone would cut me off. But what happened was very quickly, she just talked to everyone, and I got cut off. So even though, I was not disfellowshipped.
Did the elders contact you afterwards because you were spiritual sick?
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't think anyone knew where to go because what we had, my husband and I were in multiple language groups and congregations, and we had finally, in the last couple of years, we had been in a Tagalog, the Filipino language.
So you speak Spanish too?
Yep. Spanish fluently, and then we learned some Arabic, some Twi from Ghana, Africa, and some Tagalog from the Philippines.
So you was in the field ministry?
Well, yeah, and then we did some traveling and used it. We got pretty good, actually. So we tried really hard. Put a lot of effort, a lot of money into, and time into learning those languages. But we had been for 2 years in this Tagalog congregation, which had their assemblies and conventions far away on the East Coast. So we weren't going to conventions with people. People were not used to seeing us there. And then when I decided, when we were leaving, I asked the secretary to move our publisher cards. I claimed that we were going to an English congregation, and we just never went there. So I don't think they even knew who to talk to.
So where's that publisher card now?
I actually no idea, because then they were dissolving congregations because, they were losing members. So they were merging and dissolving congregations. And the one that I told them to send it to got dissolved. We did get one call. We did get one call from an elder, and I don't even remember where the congregation was from. And he did say he knew us from years ago, and he said, your cards are here, and, we'd like to meet with you. He didn't know that that we had been saying anything, negative about the organization.
But then you made a billboard.
Right. Then I made a
Now,
billboard.
now we
Everyone-
now is good. Now we know the backstory. Yeah, it's perfect. Great.
Yeah. So made this. So I was laying there in bed, thinking, how can I get the attention of people that I know so well that I can't even talk to, and it's so ridiculous. And then I thought, a billboard. If I put up a billboard in this little town where everyone knows everyone, and everyone knows the witnesses, and the witnesses would drive by every day, and then it would get some attention, and they would definitely see. And the people I grew up with, all my classmates, my teachers, would know. So and so anyway, I thought, well, I'll make some sort of a splash, some sort of a statement. I'm not quite sure what. And maybe like my parents or somebody will feel bad because they see that, and for sure they'll feel embarrassed because people in the town are going to ask them what's going on, and they'll have to answer.
Do you remember the text and how the billboard looked like?
I had to put a big picture of my face there so that people would give people's attention and know what I was, and make sure they look right. And I just drive by. And I said I lost my family to religiously mandated shunning. So I purposely did not say anything about Jehovah's Witnesses. I wanted it to be just neutral because lots of groups use that and just focus on the behavior, not the religion in particular. I lost my family to religiously mandated shunning. And that catches your attention when it says, I lost my family. People see that. And then because there was a big picture of me, then...
They know it's Jehovah's Witnesses you're talking about.
Well, so I am also involved. I'm a team member with the Stop Mandated Shunning group. And I had, even before that, I had shared my story on their website. And so I said, read my story and others at stopmandatedshunning.org. So then, yes, a lot of people did. And when they read the story, then of course they know. I mean, all my classmates knew I was witnesses. Everyone in that town knew. But yeah, my story, a lot of people went and read it.
What about your old friends, Jehovah's Witnesses, your family saw that? Did they contact you?
Well, no one in my family did, but a lot of people that I actually grew up with in the same congregation who had left, that I had not gotten a hold of. They maybe weren't on social media or hadn't really, reached out to anybody. And some of them got a hold of me. Either they called me because my phone number was on the billboard, or if they were on social media and they would find me on Facebook, or so I got contacted by probably 5 people that I grew up with that had left, which was really exciting. And we were able to have really great conversations and reminisce, and we knew the same people. We had, could share our stories of leaving and what we had gone through, and catch up a little bit. Was contacted by lots of the people that I went to high school with, and they were like, yeah, you were weird in school and you didn't celebrate anything. And
doesn't to be because of Jehovah's Witnesses you were weird. You might be weird as a person, yeah.
There's just no way for me to know because I also was a witness, so yeah.
I always say that. Don't blame the watchtower. Maybe I was just weird from my genes.
Right.
But did the elders shun you officially, disfellowship you because of that billboard?
Not as far as I know, but the most interesting response or feedback that I got was someone on Reddit who I had already communicated with them. But he had been married to someone that I grew up with in the same circuit. And and his children were visiting their grandparents, and the grandfather was an elder in the same circuit. And on speakerphone, while they were in the car, the grandson overheard the grandfather elder getting a phone call from an elder in the circuit talking all about my billboard and how this is the problem and we need to figure out what are we going to do about this billboard. We need to figure out how to respond to it and all this stuff. And that was like an hour and a half drive away. It was in the same circuit, but it was far, right? So like the whole circuit, it made a splash. Yeah. And the elders didn't know what to do.
So the billboard was almost on the way to a convention, for example. It could be.
Right.
That would be perfect, just outside.
Yeah.
But also costly.
Well, it was about $1,800 for 4 months.
Okay.
And it could possibly be up still because they only take it down if someone else buys the space. So I have to check and see. But it was up for 4 months, and yeah.
That's so funny. But you are still being shunned. You don't have any contact with your family anymore.
Well, so it's interesting. My dad has not believed since I was 14. But he was like PIMO, and he just went along with things. He didn't realize he knew it was harmful for him. He said it ruined my life. He regretted not getting an education. He regretted things that had happened with his family, like my uncle, his brother, went to prison as a conscientious objector because they were not allowed.
At that time.
They were not allowed to take alternative service. Now they are. So he said, my brother went to jail for 2 years for no reason, unnecessarily, because they had this silly rule that then they changed.
And the worst thing is, in other countries, African countries, they have been tortured and killed for the same thing. It's so stupid.
Yeah. So my dad was very, he would express his doubts. He had doubts about the flood being global. I mean, he expressed it like he was questioning and like he wasn't sure, when really he was sure and he didn't believe it. And unfortunately, because he chose that path, then he let myself and my younger brothers just continue to be raised in this. He was actually still an elder for a while when he didn't believe. And then he always still went.
Your dad were an elder?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And a PIMO?
Yeah.
At the same time?
Yeah.
I've been there, so I know how the feeling is.
So he, he raised us in it, or still was going on service, everything. And then he kind of stopped right before COVID. He stopped going out in service. And then during COVID, he stopped going to meetings and he never went back. And that was right around the same time that people were realizing I was not active anymore and didn't believe. Well, then they decided, because they didn't know that he hadn't believed for all this time, they blamed me for him stopping his activity, which was not the reason. He had stopped believing long before me. And my mom got dementia, but they didn't know it. They didn't diagnose it. And yet they hadn't diagnosed it. So that causes you to have panic attacks. So she would call the relatives crying and complaining about my dad, because what are witnesses taught? To be afraid of worldly people, or just be upset if, so he's not taking the lead spiritually, because he stopped going to meetings and whatever, and she was freaking out. But then she would be fine and she would forget she had called them. She would forget, but they didn't know she had dementia. And for a witness, it was like, oh, of course she's freaking out. Of course she's crying because her husband stopped going to meetings. For them, it was logical. So they actually kidnapped my mom.
No.
And they separated my parents for 4 months. And
who separated them?
My relatives. So they invited my parents to her sister's house, my aunt's house. And then as soon as they got there, they lured my mom away in a car, drove her off.
No, shut up. No.
Yep.
Your relatives being Jehovah's Witnesses?
Kidnapped my mom.
Because of your father wouldn't come to the meetings?
He was they said my mom was in spiritual jeopardy. Yeah, spiritual.
But between you and I, it's advantage to have dementia as a Jehovah's Witness.
Yeah. Yes. Well, and the funny thing is...
But they did that, kidnap her.
Yeah.
What did your father do? You cannot kidnap my wife.
Well, you would think, right, the normal response would be to call the police.
Yeah.
But as Jehovah's Witnesses, we don't call police. And even though
your father...
Even though he doesn't believe, But that, like, because he has never, this is why you don't want to say PIMO. It messes with you. It messes with you. So he had lost his ability to think in any sort of normal way because even though he knew this was not true, he didn't expose himself to anything healthy, anything normal. So when this happened, he did say he was going to call the police, but then he didn't realize my brother, his son, was in on it. And when my brother, who was in a different state, called my dad and said, I've spoken to mom, and like I've talked to her, and this is her choice, was what my brother had said. My dad did not talk to my mom directly. He just took my brother's word for it, and he drove off, and I didn't find out. I was out of the country. I came back, and my little brother, who is no longer a believer, tells me that our parents are separated.
That is so crazy. Beep. So after 4 months, she comes back to your dad like nothing happened?
After 4 months, they had been blackmailing my dad through my mom's text messages, which we all knew were not coming from her. We could tell. Because she would actually say, the text messages would say one thing, but sometimes they would have phone calls. And when they were having phone calls, she wasn't saying those things. When it was text messages, she would be saying, you need to come back to Jehovah. You need to talk to the elders. And you need to stop talking to your kid, our kids that don't believe. But when she was talking on the phone, she wouldn't say any of that. She was fine. And we had my little brother and I, he had just had a surgery. We had seen our parents together in the hospital. She was fine with us. She was fine with dad. Everything was fine. So it was really only the panic attacks that were making her freak out. And then the relatives were telling her, this is what you need to do. So for 4 months, they kept her. She was like bouncing around my brother's house, my aunt's houses. And then after 4 months, my dad he couldn't take it anymore. He didn't have any way to address it. He refused to ever go to the police. He went and talked to Adult Protective Services, but he never asked them to do anything. He would just talk to them. But then when they'd be like, okay, let's go and do something, he'd be like, no, I'm not ready for that. So he wasn't really doing anything. He couldn't figure out what else to do. And because he had never gotten into a healthier way of thinking, he had all the power really, but he didn't realize that he had it. So it was kind of like an abuse victim where he just went back to the abuse. So, the organization and then my relatives enforcing these abusive rules. And he gave in to all their demands, one of which was to move from the house where they were living to that little town back where I grew up, where my other brother, who is a Jehovah's Witness, lives, where he can make sure that my dad behaves himself and that my parents go to the meetings or whatever.
Can you spell to social control? Yeah, that's exactly what's happening. So more or less, they are forcing your father to move from his house and
He was
to
forced.
control
He was
him.
forced to relocate. He still had like more than half a year on his lease. He was paying rent in 2 places because he had to leave and he wasn't done with his lease in one place. And he had to cut me off. He had to cut my little brother off. And now he won't talk to anyone, like not even non-witness. He has like a non-witness cousin who's tried to call him. He won't call him back.
So now you think he's going from PIMO to PIMI?
Actually, he's not. He still doesn't believe it, but he's shutting down. So I don't think he's going to meetings. I know he's not going to conventions.
But he's not talking with you.
But he's not talking to us.
So he's still brainwashed in a way.
He's still right. He's afraid they're going to kidnap her again.
This is so scary. What is going on in the United States? I know people are crazy, but not that crazy. Even inside Jehovah's Witnesses.
I know. I was like, even for witnesses, this is crazy. Yeah. I mean, it was the dementia they didn't realize she had. And what happened, because I had been to the hospital, I had just realized my mom had dementia. I recognized it. And my dad was so mentally unhealthy, he didn't even recognize it. I'm like, Dad, you need to get her checked. And my little brother recognized it too. And before we could do anything, the relatives kidnapped her. And I did call the police. And I said my mom was kidnapped. And anyway, and then I sent a message, which no one responded to, but I know they all got. And I said, you've kidnapped a woman with dementia. First, they accused me of lying. Through my dad, I found out that they accused me of lying because I'm an apostate, right? But they knew they had to get her checked. And when they got her checked, she got diagnosed with Alzheimer's. But they still didn't give her back to my dad.
Is it developed rapidly? It's more and more dementia, Alzheimer's.
So because I can't talk to my parents, I don't know the details, but I did in October. So like a year after she was kidnapped, I drove up and I just showed up at the apartment. I didn't even know where they lived at first. It took a long time to figure out where they lived. I mean, I knew approximately, but not exactly. So I did show up, and my mom's dementia is bad enough that she doesn't remember she's supposed to shun me. So she was fine. So she opened the door, she invited us in, she hugged me. I took pictures with her. I have pictures if anyone wonders if it.
That is
So it's not my mom's choice anymore. They're enforcing it. Yeah.
Thank you to the dementia. That's so crazy. You should write a book, but it would say that they never do it. 1 out of 100 does it. But you should go to the newspapers and the media because that is
Well,
very
I did
crazy.
talk to with the Billboard. I did talk to a local reporter. He was very excited to write a story. He wanted to, but his editor didn't want to write anything controversial about religion. But I am still in touch with that reporter. He actually was frustrated. He left that newspaper because there were lots of stories he was not able to write. And so he actually wants to pitch this story of shunning in general,
Yeah,
maybe to a bigger national newspaper.
good.
And in fact,
Keep in touch with
I
him.
just told him about our visit here and what's happening in Norway. And he said, I'm definitely going to read the article that was in Dagen here in Norway. So hopefully something will happen with that.
That's so good.
Yeah.
Okay, you are a big talker. All Americans are. I know that in advance you come in. You press the button and then brrr, perfect. I love it. It's an advantage. Lastly, your husband Pablo told me that you woke up a year before him.
A couple of years.
A couple of years,
Yeah.
more than a year. And you were still together. And I heard that story. My own story is the same thing.
Yeah.
I waited for 3 years. I didn't say anything to my wife, and everybody said, you should share everything. Yeah, just not that. Because if you
Yeah.
talk about it too early, the husband, Pablo might say, oh, you're spiritual weak. I have to go to the elders. My wife is weak. Was that also why you did not tell him and say, wake up and smell the coffee, Pablo?
I actually did talk to him quite a bit. So because we had been dealing with abusive elders for years, and we were just beaten down. They refused to send our applications a few times. They tried to disfellowship us for no reason. They removed him as a servant for no reason. They removed us as pioneers. Like, they were so abusive. And we were so depressed because of that, that even though my husband still believed, he was just losing any kind of motivation to continue. He actually stopped attending meetings. He was the one who stopped attending, and I was,
During COVID?
yeah,
Around that?
a year before. Yeah. And I did hide the fact that I was doing a lot of research. I would listen to podcasts when I was driving to work, and he wouldn't know about it occasionally, but I would talk to him about research that I was doing, and he would listen to me. But if I tried to show him something or show him a video, he would freak out. Like, he didn't want to see that. Yeah. But yeah, like, it was just because he was so beaten down and depressed. Like, I don't know, like, I didn't really feel afraid to talk to him. I felt afraid
You
to talk to
trusted
other
he was
people.
loyal enough not to go to the elders. You know that?
Like, at point, yeah, at that point, we had just dealt with so much. I knew there was no way he was going to go to the elders.
This is good partnering.
Steering clear of the elders.
Neither quite. But what about yourself? You several years. There was at one point, because you sounded like in your youth, your childhood, that you were really believing Jehovah's Witness. You were a pioneer.
Yeah.
When did it tip over and you began one crack of doubts? What started it all?
So yeah, I mean, I was super zealous basically up until almost the time I woke up. But I do remember, like, in 2016, in May, I went to the elders. We were still being slandered by elders. They would literally tell our friends we were pioneering again and everything, and they would tell our friends that we were bad association and stay away with us.
You were marked.
I think we had been, although no one ever told us, but I think there was a talk at some point. But we were already pioneering again. Like, technically there was no reason. They just hated us. Certain elders just liked to throw their weight around and have control. So and we had proof that they were continuing to do this, and we had friends that were willing to come forward and say, like, this elder told me this, and they shouldn't be saying this about Pablo and Monica and whatever. the elders, they still wouldn't do anything. I'm like, this has been years that we've been dealing with this, and no one wants to do anything. Get us all in a room. You can find out the truth. We have evidence. We have witnesses. We have written information. They had falsified our publisher cards, and I had a copy of the real publisher card and the fake publisher card. Like, it was crazy. And I'm like, there's so much evidence. Just get in a room and figure it out. And because it's not going away. Oh, let's just move on and start fresh. No, there's no way to start fresh. These people will keep slandering us until you put them on the spot for it, right? Like, so anyway, so finally I went to the elders and I am like, this is the last time I try to get help from the place I'm told I'm supposed to get help from, because I have gone to you over years and you keep saying you want to help. You keep seeing it's a problem. You know it's a problem. You see the evidence and you just won't do anything about it.
Brother Harris, do you have a moment?
Sure, Faye. How can we help you?
Well, you probably heard by now. David and I got engaged this past weekend.
We heard. Congratulations. We're so happy for both of you.
Thanks so much. And since this is where I grew up, it would mean a lot to us if we could get married in this kingdom hall. So we were hoping, since you're the coordinator of the body of elders, you'd be able to let us know today if we can use the hall. Then David and I can start working on our wedding invitations. David asked me to give you this letter, making our official request.
Okay. Yes, this is a good letter. This has all the information that we need. I'm going to check with the other elders, and we're going to discuss it. Then we'll get right back to you.
Oh, you mean you can't tell me right now? I thought since you're the coordinator, you'd have the authority to, you know.
I understand, but there is a theocratic arrangement that we all have to follow, even the elders. And the arrangement is for the entire service committee to discuss this, consider the matter thoroughly, and before any approval is given. So I don't have the authority to make a decision on my own.
Of course, that makes sense. I understand.
But don't worry, Faye. We're going to get on this as soon as possible. Then you can move forward with your wedding plans.
Thank you so much, Brother Harris. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And I've been following all the rules and doing everything right. I've been praying and praying and crying on my knees, and you're not doing anything. And when they still didn't do anything, then I'm like, then I'm quitting pioneering. And they were upset that I did that. And I'm like, well, you didn't do anything to help me. So what do you expect?
I heard that angle many times. A lot of people are leaving Jehovah's Witnesses because of the elders.
Yeah.
It's a personal thing. But I know what the Watchtower say. But the elders are not perfect people. They make mistakes. This doesn't mean that the whole organization and the teachings are wrong, Monica. You know how to speak. So when did it shift over from personal experience till no, there's no overlapping generation, blah, 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 the teachings?
Well, so I had known, because I was also very studious, I knew about the generation changes. My dad, who didn't believe, would always make these comments, right? And I would kind of dismiss it. When I started going through this, you know, abuse, and I couldn't take it anymore, and I was thinking about everything, and I realized my dad doesn't believe this. He predicted they would change the generation teaching before they changed it, right? And he would talk about 1975. I knew all about that. I knew so much history. And I was interested in history, world organizational history. I started getting some of the old books genuinely because I wanted to collect them, and I would see stuff that was totally different. And then we would travel, and we went to Israel, and I would see the ruins there, and it was all these layers and layers of like pagan idols that were in every layer. And I'm like, I don't think these people were ever monotheists. Like,
So you educated yourself, actually. You became...
and you go to the Israel Museum, and they don't say anything about the Exodus because there's no evidence for the Exodus. So there was a lot of cracks. Yeah, and it basically, though, I wasn't like really aware of it. And then once I started going down that path, I'm like, oh, it's all wrong.
So you started, and then this is the same path I went down. Oh, no, there's something wrong in the congregation. The elders are not gifts from God. As they're Watchtower, they are gifts from... No, they're not. Maybe they are hategifts in some areas. But then you begin to question the Watchtower, the religion, and then the Bible. Oh, is there something in the Bible? But the Bible is true, and we are apologetics. No, there's a lot of... And it's step by step. You don't go from here to there. You have to
Right.
to develop. You know, that's what, your time is up, Monica.
Okay.
I know you can.
Because
You
I have not had a sip of my wine.
you should say, no, of course not. You're talking all the. I love you talking, and all Americans, they're so good at it. But you compliment very good Pablo. But he's very calm, and he said this, and you blah blah blah. It's a perfect combination. You really fit each other. And now you're here in Norway, and you're supporting, and you are giving good energy, and everybody is happy. What's not
Yeah.
to like? So next
Great.
time you invite us to Minnesota.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I've been there before. The Twin Cities. You know, my old friend from there, the doctor, the try to find. We have to. He was from the Twin Cities.
I'll find out.
Very nice people.
I have connections. I'll find it out.
But there's one thing. I think I mentioned before. Sorry, I'm repeating myself. But now I'm talking to a true American from Minnesota, Minnesotian. He said his impression of Denmark, the Danish Jehovah's Witnesses. Sorry to say, Frank, but they're not real Jehovah's Witnesses, because the young girls, they're short or too, the skirts are too short. When I invited him to a party, not a lot of beer, where nobody was drunk, but oh no, they were overstepping. They were, you know, it's a culture in the culture. So the Danish cultures, let's have some fun, and then you come with all the strict rules, trying to fly under the radar. He did not like what he saw in Denmark. Yeah, it's so funny.
They were pretty straight laced.
So maybe they left the organization because they were very nice people in general. I like them very much.
Well, that would be great.
Yeah.
Then we should definitely look them up.
You should. Promise me. Thank you very much, Monica, and have a nice trip back tomorrow. You are leaving.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's so nice.
You too, or
No, I'm leaving Wednesday.
okay?
But it's only an hour and a half from here by plane, so it's very close. Copenhagen, no problems. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, that was so fun.